Welcome back to the Sleeping Grush podcast. I am Loremaster Matt,
I'm Fail on John.
and it's good to be with you all here today. We are actually coming to you from 3 different locations. We've done this before, so I think we've got all this sorted. Our wonderful producer, Jager Madsen, is on location at Tabletop Game and Hobby there in Kansas City in Overland Park, while John and I are out at our respective domiciles for the moment. We are brought to you today, as we are every day, by Cardboard Corner Cafe, Kansas City's premier gaming cafe. You can get fantastic waffles, you can get fantastic drinks, but most of all, you can get fantastic company and plenty of fun games. So if you find yourself in the Kansas City area, for whatever reason, stop by Cardboard Corner Cafe. So, John, last week we talked about we talked about Adepticon and all the amazing things that are on there, but we also talked about looking to the future, seeing what was going on with EGS games as we move forward through the rest of the year and into next year. And we got through some really important things, but we left off one big thing that's coming down the pike. And we're going to talk about that today. And what is that, John? What are we things that we're looking forward to here? What is that thing?
Matt is referring to our next campaign, next global campaign, and we are in the kind of the mode of maybe 2 a year, which we're going to run out of EGS as a global event. That's not to say that as these campaigns get loaded into World Anvil and they become available to the players, local groups can do whatever they like, and we support them and we'll support them. But twice a year, we're gonna kind of lead the way with new and splendiferous things. We run campaigns for Freeblades for quite some time now, but the early ones were all fairly simple. They were narrative stories. They had some theme to them, not a lot of depth. Not a lot of differences from the main game. And lately, we've tried to take a course where the campaigns have something super special about them. The currently running campaign is Nevedim, The Voices of Dust, which takes place in Nevedim. And it's just, I think it's amazing. I did not write Nevedim, any significant portion of it. I mean, the idea of the city and what had happened to it in a global sense, in a meta sense, was for my original story. But what Jeff and Matt did in taking that story and weaving all the different parts and making interesting scenarios and adding new rules elements is just I just stayed away because I wanted them to have a box to play in, where I was not messing with them. I could play and do it on my own anyway, and it came out superbly. And I'm honestly, I'm envious. I think it's a great piece of work, and I wasn't working on something as cool in the design world as they were when it came out. So I resolved to say, okay, I'm going to take the controls of the next campaign because I think it would benefit us from having a little bit of a, internal, not competition, but they set a very high bar, and I want to try to match it or exceed it. So the next campaign is called The Inner Sea. And if you're familiar with the northern continent on the map of the world of Phalon, roughly in the middle of it, not exactly, is a large landlocked body of water known as the Inner Sea in English. Um, and we are going to have a campaign that takes place on this. It is strides the border of the Kingdom of Herodel and the Kingdom of Falkar. And what I thought we'd do is, man, I want to read the intro to the campaign because this will be the first time somebody's heard this outside of the company because we've been working on it internally. And I'll explain the rest of the pieces. You and I can go back and forth on the rest of the pieces, but I want to set the stage for what it is we're talking. What's the story here? Then we'll talk
I think
about
that's awesome.
the mechanics and all the things that are
Sure. And
components of
before you do that,
Sure.
I just want to say that there's a long history of these wars taking place between Falkar and Haradel. A long history within our own campaign systems of these, wars that kind of take place between Falkar and Haradel. So this is really cool because not only is it a continuation of something that we've visited in the past, but it's something completely new, and I just find that awesome and refreshing and innovative.
And we're going to, and we're up in the ante here. Mostly these conflicts between Aradel and Falkar have been skirmishes. This is
Right?
something a level above that.
Awesome.
Also, some time ago, the last year or so, Matt and the design crew and I all got together and aligned the timeline of Phalon so that the last digit of the Phalonian year matches the last digit of the Earth calendar year, so that we can advance the calendar and it kind of makes sense what's happening in any given time. And so it'll be easy for someone to recognize whether something is in Phalon's past, coming in the future, or contemporaneous. So,
And that's going to be really useful going forward as we start to kind of count down to a much larger event that's in the future that we've talked about before. So I really love that we align things. Yeah.
and so one of the key elements we want to have in these campaigns, and across the world to fail on, really, is that what happens inside the campaign, the global campaign, impacts on our story. So as we move forward, we're leaving large semantic sections um, open in terms of what the result is, and then letting the players tell us how that's going to go one way or the other inside some basic boundaries. We can't have the world blow up; that would kind of be a bummer. But inside some basic boundaries. And I'll explain how that works with the NSC here in a moment, in general terms. But let me just read you this intro. We can set the stage on what's happening here. Okay.
Awesome.
So this is from the first page of what will, the draft campaign document. Welcome to the Inner Sea, a place like no other in all of Asartiel, possibly all of Phalon. A massive landlocked freshwater lake. The Inner Sea is some 220 miles long by 190 wide and dotted with dozens of tiny islands, some yet to appear on any chart. In its center sits Shi Erlen, an island of some 400 square miles and fought over for centuries by those wishing to control the sea's trade routes. While the Inner Sea is no stranger to conflict, in 1004 a border war will break out between the kingdoms of Falkar and Haradel, their various allies, and not a small number of otherwise unaligned opportunists. This war will surpass all previous fighting over the Inner Sea in scope, participants, impact, and cost. The war will be marked by vicious sea battles, lightning raids on coastal communities, island hopping misadventures, and a ceaseless, bloody seesaw struggle for sheer land. The war will make and break the reputations of no small number of mariners. It will place many a promising sailor in Orva's loving arms. It will see the rise of Kareb Norden, a squadron commander in the Herodella Navy, Oran Desac, the son of the Duke of Turena, and of course, the mysterious figure known as the Black Cutlass. Early in 1004, Norden's patrol squadron chases a pirate to the shoals off Erlin Island, only to find a Falkaran Navy galley has done the same. Employing Erlin's neutrality status as a wedge against both pursuers, the pirate beaches and puts his crew ashore. A heated argument about jurisdiction and sovereignty ensues between the two opposing captains. When Norden reaches the limits of his patience, he chases off the lone Falkaran, burns the pirate vessel, hangs all of its crew, and raises a spare sail like a banner on Erlin's highest point, claiming the island for Haradel. The War of the Red Sail has begun. So that's the intro.
I've
Um,
got shivers.
and I wrote it, so it's pretty awesome. But the idea is that this campaign is going to set the status of the Inner Sea and the border between Paradel and Falcar for several years to come in the future. What that status is going to be determined by the post-conflict resolution that all of the players in the campaign will be involved in. So at some point, the war will end, however it ends, and there'll be some kind of it's not going to destroy either Haradel or Falcar, right? But it's going to somebody's going to win it. Well, possibly it could also be a total draw. I mean, if any group of players could put off a total draw out of a war, it's our group of players. But um, more likely than not, there'll be a winner. But winner, in this kind of conflict is relative, and we're going to have a peace conference at the end when the war ends, and the players will have gained influence on behalf of whatever faction they're fighting for or themselves, and be able to use that influence in the peace conference to um, influence the future.
That's
So,
fantastic. That's
yeah,
awesome.
so you'll know. We're not going to give you the details of that right now, but you'll know from the start what you're looking to have when the thing ends. Okay. So as you're in each scenario, sure, there's gold to be had. You want to increase the size of your free band, maybe increase the number of ships available to you, Commodore. Depends on how you want to go about that. And uh, the other things that you get out of winning a scenario, doing well in the games, um, but also the influence to take into post-war events and the influence on what happens between the two kingdoms uh, when the um, when the war ends. And so we have not determined that. It could end up, well, Falcar wins big, Falcar wins small, Haradel wins big, Haradel wins small, or some kind of draw situation, stalemate. And we don't know. And we're going to let the players' results tell us over the course of the campaign.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I know that there's a couple of things that we're working on. I just as an aside, because you had mentioned, Jeff and I had worked on Nevadim and on the Voices of Dust campaign, and just as pulling the curtains aside and letting people see in, it took me a good year and a half to put together the background information on Nevadim before we even started talking about the campaign and the campaign structure and things like that. So I know that you've been hard at work on a couple pieces of this campaign for a while. That it has a couple of different components, and I'm sitting here at my desk in my workshop, fondling a plastic canoe, and I thought maybe that would help prompt
Not
one.
a euphemism, right? I mean, this is a family-friendly show.
This is not euphemistic for once. This is an actual canoe that I had purchased some time ago, and apparently is going to find some use pretty soon.
So yeah, so let me. It's got a lot of pieces to it. Um, and the Voices of Dust campaign is the most in-depth and intricate campaign that we have attempted for Freeblades, and we've learned a lot. You know, I think it's just amazing start to finish. But I'm a long time miniatures gamer, and the more stuff you pile on me, the better I like it. Not everybody's that way, you know. So we also have the challenges of we want to keep players interested and competitive throughout a campaign, right? If they come down to the game store, oh, I'm so far behind in my free band value. It's just not worth it, or I'm two scenarios behind, or yeah, I just don't. I'm just not as motivated as I was at the start, and that happens. I've played millions of campaigns, well, hundreds. Let's just call it hundreds. Lots of campaigns, and I've seen it every time. Now our handicap system helps with that. The ability to play a rogue game helps. But there's still more to be done. So I've been working on that for one thing. But before I get to really in depth about helping the campaigners stay in the campaign throughout and making that easy on them as much as possible. And the story of the NRC, there's two things we had to do before that. The first one is different in terms of terrain requirements. Um,
Right.
to do it the way we'd like people to be able to do, you're going to need sea terrain. You're going to need um, an underlying sea mat or a mat of the beach. Now that doesn't have to be, some multi-hundred-dollar enterprise. That could be, some brown construction paper and some blue construction paper. But the more, people have time to be able to look at creative solutions to this, the better their game groups, the better off their game groups will be. And so we've already told all the questers what it is will be different about the terrain requirements for some of these scenarios, right? So we had to get that done first. We had to give some practical information to all the questers for all their groups on what their groups could look at gathering, so that later this summer, whenever we pull the trigger, we don't have an exact start date yet. They will have had plenty of time to think about that. And it's not just terrain; it's boats, it's ships. Okay, and so as Matt's talking, is that a Firelock canoa? What have you got
It
there?
it's actually not. I'm not sure what company the original design came from, but it was a 3D printed piece that I picked up at Adepticon that looked like, well, I measured. I brought a couple figs back that would hold a very small force. Because just as a spoiler for everybody, I'm putting together an Ertigar free band to play in this campaign.
Yeah. So what we're going to do, and what it's already being done, is we're writing a set of rules for ships in a Freeblades context, meaning these are basically conveyances. They get the Freeblades to the action, right? There'll be a scenario, at least one scenario in there where it's at sea, completely at sea, right? And all you need for your terrain is a 4x4 space that's water. But most of this action is in proximity to land. And the technological um, setting of Phalon, we're not talking about 17th century and beyond cannon armed sailing vessels, duking it out like Pirates of the Caribbean. And we're talking about, the 1300s, the 1400s, right? And so um, it's also a fantasy setting. We're not looking for, a lot of gunpowder. There will be slight amounts of gunpowder introduced, but by far our playership is interested in, mostly gunpowderless fantasy. So between the realistic technological parts of this and realistic, thematic technological parts of this, and uh, the setting and everything else, these are ships that are going to be near each other, and they're going to be not where the ship can destroy another ship at range. It's going to be boarding actions and to a limited extent archery that's going to be doing what it's doing. And the ships are going to be propelled by sweeps or oars, right? Now, having said that, we're going to make allowances for every reasonable model, 3D print, purchased, built, modeled, uh, Pathfinder ship mat, the grid tiles of ships, something you drew on a piece of graph paper. That's going to be up to the players. We're just going to write the rules to make it so that all those things work. So take for example, and this is probably close to what you got, Matt. Firelock canoa, um,
Mhm.
the boat made in resin by Firelock Games for the game Blood and Plunder. A large canoe basically holds six 25 millimeter base models. Is about 7 inches long. Um, And that's, probably the smallest, although, you show us the thing, we'll make the rules for it, right? But probably the smallest you're going to want. And these ships will be rated in terms of the speed based on how many crew they apply to the sweeps or can apply to the sweeps, their size, how well they turn, what kind of draft they have in terms of what kind of water they can go into with respect to depth, and some other features. And so, as we get closer, people can send us a photograph of their ship model or their ship tile or a mat with a ruler. If it's not gridded, a ruler for size along the side of it, and as many 25 millimeter models or bases um, that can sit on the decks flat without overlapping. If we have that photograph, we'll return to you what the stats of um, that ship are and what the cost is in terms of gold royals. In
That's
order to
awesome.
do that, yeah, in order to do that, so we're going to be as flexible as we possibly can. At some point, we're going to make Phaelonian ship models in a couple of scales somewhere down the road, but not today. So uh, we're going to use or let the players use whatever they want to use to make this work and make it fit inside the scope of the game. To do that, we had to write a prototype of our ship rules called Seablades because that's fun. You Interesting side note. When we decided to go to a skirmish game, the very first iteration of the Phalon-based skirmish game, when we decided to do a skirmish game first instead of a role-playing game, was called Pirates of Phalon. That was a working title until Jason Condon won the naming contest with the name Freeblades. And we were looking at, doing it more sea-based to start, but then realized we weren't going to be making ship models as fast as we wanted to make it and wanted to make it primarily land-based. And that's when Freeblades was born. But a prototype of these rules have been sitting around for a long time. We've even demoed it a couple times in event games, places like Adepticon in the past. So we've done this already. So the beta test set of Seablades just got done probably half an hour ago. and
Wow.
yeah, and I'm
Very
going to be leaving
specific.
it with I'm going to be leaving it with Jeff and Colin. I've got things to do the next few days. Turn it over to Jeff and Colin, walking away from it and let the two of them pick it apart and you get extra sets of eyes on it. You're never your own copy editor. It's always bad. Then we'll come back together, clean it up, and then we'll turn it over to the playtesters. Well in advance of when Intersea kicks off to get that refined and get it in better shape. So it's where we want it um, when the campaign kicks off. So we had to tell people about the terrain, we had to tell people about the ship, so we had to get the ship rules done. And then what will happen is your free band is going to pay a little bit for the ship or ships that they use to participate in these scenarios. And the
That's
scenarios have some fun stuff in there. There's one, of course, where you got to have the two ships meet at sea, grapple each other and vast, right? You
right.
got to do that. There's Monster Island, where there's an island in the middle of the table, and um, the two free bands approach from each side. There's an objective in the middle. They've got to get off the island, but it's covered in monsters that randomly appear. Um, there's Treasure Island, which is basically the treasure hunt scenario, also on an island. There's coastal raids, um, and a couple of other, scenarios out there. And what we'll do is every block you're playing a scenario in, there'll be an alternative. If you just don't have any of these things or you're brand new and you want to play regular free play scenario instead, there'll be you can have another choice. What we're trying to do is to get the groups, the questers, enough information, enough in advance that their group can create enough stuff to loan, to share, whatever, so everybody can get out to sea. But it might not even be about having the material. It might just be, hey, I just learned the game. I want to play a regular treasure hunt first before I try this um, flying around in whatever
Right.
dog.
Right.
You know.
And
Also, One more note, Matt, real quick.
Yeah, sure.
Although these are not 17th century or 18th century sailing ships that we're talking about here, those are okay also. So if you get a firelock brigantine or a sloop or a tartana or whatever, or some equivalent that you 3D printed, and they are really from Earth's, you know, 18th century, that's okay. You're just not gonna have any cannon, you know. But the other
Right, right.
characteristics, and then you're not gonna be sailing, having the mast on it. So if you buy this for another game and use it for ours, and you get dual use out of it, it's all good. We're not gonna
Yeah.
worry about whether now you buy the USS Indianapolis from World War II. I can't help you.
It's pretty hard to get
So,
oars off of that, but
so that's the current stats. The next thing to do is to get back into my notes and pull the campaign itself together while the playtest of Seablades is going
right.
on. It's the next step.
It, there were a couple of things that you talked about in there, John, that I want to hit on because we were talking earlier about what we had learned from the Voices of Dust campaign, and one of them was that new people into the game were having some trouble keeping up with newer iterations of rules or additions to rules, and I love that idea that you've come up with, where if you don't have the terrain or don't want to use the extra rules, you can play a standard scenario in its place so that you don't have to complicate things if you can't or don't want to. Are there any other innovations that you're thinking about that will help newer players adapt, or even older players adapt, where some of the new stuff is going to be complicated or more difficult?
Well, the first thing is Nevadim. Like I said, I love the intricacy of Nevadim, the Voices of Dust campaign. But a lot got added. A lot of different items got added, right?
Hmm.
Shards, continual magic, the terrain changes, the terrain districts. And so, really, the one good piece of news here is that Seablades is Seablades start to finish. It's the
Right.
only real add-on to the base game system, right? So it's less intricate in that respect, and we're going to release all the scenarios at once. We're not going to have it be serial. Not that we can't ultimately find a way to do that and return to it, but we're gonna take a moment and not do a campaign that way to give us more time to think about how we'd like to do a reveal campaign in the future. You know,
Right. Right.
it was right, and it was just a coincidence. We had a lot of new players, which is awesome, and we want that. And we had layers of cool stuff in this Voices of Dust campaign. You know, the scenarios are being revealed week to week. There were multiple new rules. Patrons were changing. And because of the influence aspect, you're going to pick one patron and stay with it also throughout the campaign of Inner Sea. Um,
Mhm.
because you have to pick a side, you
Right.
know, and that'll all be made clear. When you get the campaign, PDF, you're going to get exactly, if I work for this person, this is what I get. And this is the implications for what I'm trying to do in each scenario and what I'm trying to accomplish at campaign end, you know. And I think, we ought to take a look at having this grand peace conference on Discord. You know,
I
I'm,
I
I'm,
love
I'm
that
picturing
idea.
the conclave of Nicaea. You
Right.
know, what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I
This,
do.
I think it's a Da Vinci Code where um, Ian McKellen's character is kind of narrating how they got where they were with the history of the Grail and divinity and all this sort of thing. And there's a outtake cinematic clip of that council, And I'm like, that's what I picture is a bunch of Freeblades players all representing, their sea captains, their Freeblades leaders, working for this king or that baron or this count, or some
Right.
independent in there arguing over, where the border's going to be and who gets what and all this sort of thing,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
I think
think,
that'd be awesome.
yeah, it's Discord tags where they can show their affiliation,
Hmm.
um, while they're online and just like the Georgia Parliament, you know. So
Just hopefully a little less like the Georgia Parliament.
you might have to Google that shit. I don't know, but
Oh my gosh.
it's pretty contemporaneous too right now. So
It is. It is. It should be fresh in your news feeds. Um, we're just about out of time here, so I want to say something real quick, and then I'm gonna ask you one more question, John. But you were
yeah.
talking about groups getting together and doing terrain if you didn't have any, and if you couldn't purchase or maybe get some 3D printed. I'm just going to throw out right now to everybody that's listening that if you have a how-to on making some terrain that will fit this theme, this sea theme, seashore, sea stacks, whatever that may be. If you have a good tutorial on that, send that to me on Discord, D Matthew Gooch, or you can send it to media@dgsgames.com, and we will get that put together to release to the whole group, and so that will help everybody. So if you've got some tips, tricks, let's get those published. Let's help our brothers and sisters across the United States and across the world out, getting the terrain that they need to play this. It's going to be an incredible campaign. So if you guys would do that, think about it. Think if there's anything that you've made before that you know how to make really well and can convey that to the rest of the folks that play, and we'll get that set up. John, before we go, is there anything else that you want to tell us about the campaign or what to expect? Um, Maybe just some little inside coolness that you've got that you want to leave us with.
Well, let me say one thing that's kind of related to what you just talked about. Right now, the little kind of packaged guidance we gave the questers on what kind of terrain and the ship characteristics is on the Quester channel on Discord, which is a private channel. So it's not
Mhm.
widely disseminated yet. Reason for that is because, well, I don't we have to do certain things to get ready for NRC. I do not in any way want to detract from the focus on Voices of Dust. Because of my
Okay.
current circumstances, I was not able to finish the campaign, but I'm super envious of those that get to be in it. And we don't want to take away from that by people going, oh yeah, whatever, Voice of Dust, but I got to get my island built. No, we
Right.
didn't want that.
Right.
But we're now in the last, block of Voices of Dust.
The last
As soon
game.
as that's right, as soon as that's done, I'm going to go on Train Builders, which is an open channel, right?
Hmm.
Called Train Builders.
Brand Builders Unite.
Train Builders Unite. I'm going to go on Train Builders Unite and put the guidance for ships and the terrain for Inner Sea, and add a little detail after we've refined Seablades a little bit. So I got a little bit more detail to give and get that out there so that people can share ideas and help each other. Oh, I found this really cool ship on such link, or this is how I built my island or my coastline. This is where I got a mat that has a beach. It didn't cost me a lot of money, whatever, so that people can across the board, help each other out and make this whatever it can be for their gaming group. So anticipate that. But really, please, well, by the time this comes out, where are we with Voice of Dust when this podcast arrives? Like a week from now. Is that the end or is that in the middle of the last block or?
Well, we will be releasing the stats for the final game, the encounters game that kind of caps the campaign. We'll be releasing that either late this weekend, the coming weekend, or early next week, which is when this episode will be dropping. Uh, John, you'll be playing in Kansas City on Tuesday, next Tuesday, on the 23rd, and we are going to be playing that final game then. So, folks will start playing that final game in the next probably couple of weeks and wrapping things up. So that'll be right in time.
Yeah, so I would say then about a week from when you hear this podcast is released, um, when the episode goes up, is about when that information will be on Train Builders Unite. So before the end of April, you'll have that. And be able to ask all kinds of questions. I will spend more time on that channel than I normally do. So I'm not a terrain builder, helping people out. Um, and people can share ideas. And I'm sympathetic to the issue of I don't have the money for a whole ton of islands or sea mats, but gamers help gamers, right?
Hmm.
I am constantly loaning out ships and models and terrain and everything. I'm sure there's plenty of folks in the game groups that are gonna, give their brothers and sisters a leg up, if that's not something they could get. Or, it really doesn't matter if your Freeblades are arrayed on a Pathfinder ship mat or a picture you drew on a grid, with 1-inch squares. It's all fine. We're all here to get together and have a good time.
Yeah.
We're not trying to make people spend money, but we are modelers of 3D representations. And this is a hobby, so it is a luxury pursuit. So we are going to support the idea that when you can, you 3D model these things. But we are also going to, throw our arms around our fellow gamers and help them have the best experience they can. So I will have scenarios that are alternatives that are not sea based in each block. So you don't have to do that if you don't want to, and especially if it's because you're inexperienced, you don't want to take on a whole new rule set when you're learning Freeblades. That makes sense. But if it's because you can't personally afford the terrain or the ships or whatever, we're going to do everything we can to get your group, the nearest people to you or whatever, to give out, a hand and help their fellow gamer, because that's what we're all about.
Right.
So we're gonna do everything we can now.
Awesome. Well, I am personally looking forward to this a lot. Not just from a campaign perspective because I love campaigns, but it's the kind of the next iteration. It's the next new thing for Freeblades, and I'm always looking forward to how the game develops and how the world develops and how the system develops. So this is going to be exciting. John, thank you for that breakdown. We're going to get going. You'll John is coming back into town, so we might actually be all be in the same room in the near future, which is going to be awesome. And folks, thank you very much for listening. Thank you for being with us today. Again, if you have anything that you'd like to say or to make comment on or questions to ask, drop that in the Sleeping Grush podcast channel on our World of Phalon Discord. It is a lively, hopping channel a lot of the times, especially after a new episode drops. So if you have anything that you would like to ask about or anything you'd like to see or hear on one of these podcasts, make sure you drop it in there. And until next time, we'll see you around the table.
Still Sakava.